People who live rurally, what's the scariest experience you've had that you can't explain? I was camping alone in the middle of the plains in North Dakota. A storm blew in and I was stuck in my tent under some trees and got a super strange feeling. I had two phones on me at the time. One had internet and was for navigating and the other was just for cell reception. 2013. All of a sudden, one of the phones started ringing and I looked at the caller ID. The call was coming from my other phone which was closed and in my hand. 15 years ago I had a seasonal job with the US Forest Service in western Colorado for the summer. I was living in an old ranger station by myself. One night I had a dream that someone was walking around the cabin while I was in bed. When I woke up that morning the front door was wide open. For the rest of the summer I slept with a large knife close by. One time I woke up from a nap and my back door was open. I know for sure I locked it beforehand. I think my landlord came in and was watching me sleep. I live alone in the woods 15 minutes from my town. My neighbors are near but not right next door. One summer morning I woke around 4:30 am to a strange pounding sound. It was still kind of dusky dawn lighting and I was in a daze from just waking up. Then I started to hear a man's voice yelling, "Somebody help me." I began to look out my windows to see if I could see anyone but couldn't from upstairs. My home has no window coverings on any windows. I went downstairs and caught a glimpse of him, naked with a thin t-shirt on, running around my house trying to jiggle windows and doors. He was very erratic, kept screaming for someone to help him, and kept running from door to window all around trying to find a way in. In any normal situation, I would gladly help someone in need. But this situation felt too unpredictable and dangerous for me to allow this person into my home. I was able to contact my neighbors who got my message and quickly made their way over to help me. This is faster than any police that can get here. The guy ran away straight into the trees before they arrived. He was picked up by our CMP shortly after. No idea what happened there. My dad used to rent this house way out in the middle of nowhere. A good 45 minutes from any town. The closest neighbor was another 15 minutes away. On this property were several enclosures for raising pheasants. These belonged to the property owner, so my dad had no responsibility towards them, other than to notify the owner if he saw anything wrong. He was high school buddies with the owner, so they were on good terms. Well, one morning he notices something very wrong. In the pheasant enclosure furthest from the house, with a good 50 or so birds, every single one of them had been slaughtered overnight. What was even weirder was that it didn't seem to be an act of predation. None of the birds seemed to have been consumed. Luckily the owner had cameras and they got to see what really happened. So sometime in the middle of the night, a man neither of them recognized had wandered onto the property. He made no attempt to approach the house, but instead crawled under the enclosure's fence and proceeded to catch and stab each pheasant with a knife while wearing a headlamp. They caught the entire event on camera, from him entering the property till he left early in the morning. The police were called but nothing ever came of it. My dad was so freaked out from the whole event that he made us stay with our mom for several weeks while he slept in bed with a gun. The property owner tightened up security with new fences and alarms. He even bought some guard dogs. They were very well trained and super friendly to anyone who'd approach them during the day. Nothing ever happened again on that farm, and the bird killing psycho was never found. This is the freakiest story I've read on here. My mother lives alone pretty much in the woods. Completely dark at night. No street lights or lights from neighbors. Only a small road leading up to the house. One time in the middle of the night she woke up to clear footsteps on the gravel. You know the sound. And 3 knocks on the front door. She called out hello and looked outside and nothing there. Only silence. It might not be a spectacular story, but I would freak out if it was me waking up to that in the middle of the night with no other people around. I walked about a mile from home to go mushroom hunting in a usual area. Walked through a field of goldenrod as high as my shoulders and was about to enter the woods when I felt something strange. I felt like I needed to go or I wouldn't get out of there alive. I didn't hear or see anything, but I had got goosebumps and I felt anxious when everything was fine before I reached that spot. I stood there debating and decided to go hunt somewhere else. I've gone back many times and haven't experienced that again. I live in an area that have bears, wolves, coyotes and bobcats. I've never had any problems with them on walks or hikes in the woods. But maybe that day would have been different, or maybe there was a bad person in there. I've learned to trust this feeling I get. It saved me many times, and when I ignored it I got hurt. Whatever was in there, I did the right thing in not going in. I think you're right in that your instinct probably saved you. There are tons of little details that we don't always consciously notice, but subconsciously we do. These are details that can be very minor sounds, smells, or just something out of place. But the instinct is genuinely a solid safety measure that shouldn't be ignored. I grew up on a small property in regional Australia. We lived about 3-4 kilometers out of town, so not super far, but also far enough that we never really get disturbed. On top of that, we were on a dead-end street, down the end of another street off of the main road, so not once have I ever seen a pedestrian near my house. Anyway, one night when I was about 12, I was watching TV when two of my brothers came downstairs and said, "Did you hear that?" I was pretty glued to the TV so didn't hear a thing, but apparently they heard footsteps outside and a couple of hushed voices. Seeing as how my brothers were both around 20 and both big rugby playing dudes, their plan was for me to wait inside, while they ran outside and tackled anybody they could find before calling the cops. So they both sprinted out the front door at the same time, splitting in different directions to wrap around the house and meet again on the other side, presumably each with a criminal wrapped in a headlock under their arm. If you've ever seen that movie Signs where Mel Gibson and Joaquin Phoenix run around the house, basically just picture that. Anyway, they never found them. Swear to this day that they heard voices, but nobody was ever seen. Our property has a lot of thick bushland right up to the house, so all we can think is that when my brothers came out, these guys just dissolved back into the bush and watched, then probably just took off once the coast was clear again. The whole thing scared the heck out of me. Sorry man, but I laugh at the thought of them tackling each other. When I was a teenager I went to visit my aunt and cousins who lived in the boonies in a town named Eager, AZ, close to the border of New Mexico and half a mile away from the town where Fire in the Sky took place. I was really into alien abductions lore. I suffered from sleep paralysis where I'd wake up but couldn't open my eyes or move my body. Anyway, late at night after everyone went to bed, I put on a movie. I can't remember the name of it, but it was like the Blair Witch version of an alien abduction movie. I was really into it, and totally geeked out. All the lights in the house were off, just the TV screen. I heard something behind me and slowly turned around in my reclining chair only to see a goddamn alien staring at me. I freaked out and jumped straight into the air screaming. Guys, it was a half-inflated balloon left over from my cousin's day party. This isn't a super scary experience or anything, but at the time, I was like 10 or so. It was pretty unnerving. So I was staying with my grandparents who live pretty much in the middle of nowhere, and a dude knocked on their door. He asked for directions to town, but they lived on a dead-end road where the only way to get up there is to come from town, so he obviously knew where it was. They then pointed in the direction he needed to go, and then he said thanks. But instead of getting back into his car, he just ran off into the woods as fast as he could. They called the cops but they never found him, so we have no clue what happened. He left his car in their driveway and never came back for it. Camping as a kid behind Buddy's house. Heard most god-awful terrifying screech, like two pieces of metal being rubbed together. Hands absolutely trembled unzipping tent and we hauled butt to the house. Honestly, I was still scared in there too. Thought something was going to come through window and get me. Probably a cougar mountain lion I suppose, but they aren't common here at all. I grew up on a ranch, in a small, old California ranch house. Lots of windows to stay cool on the summer. Almost all the rooms open to the central living room. I was probably 14. My brother was 11, and my mom was out at night running an errand. Brother and I are together in the living room. He's sitting by the stove and I'm lying on the sofa. We're both doing homework. Inside the lights are on, but through the windows it's pitch black. As I'm reading I hear footsteps on the mud porch leading up the front door. It's an old house, and I hear the heavy footsteps clearly, but I hadn't seen my mom's car drive in. I hadn't seen or heard any car. It's the country. I would have heard a car approaching and seen their headlights through the dark windows. But there was nothing, just the footsteps on the porch. They stop at the front door, but no one knocks. I am frozen. If I had gotten up and looked around the corner through the kitchen, I would have seen the owner of the footsteps standing at the door, which had a window, but then they would have seen me. If I talk to my brother, they'll hear me, and in the dark, anyone could be looking through the windows at us, but we couldn't see out. I go through all my options. The person is standing at the only door in or out of the house, which is always unlocked. If I go to the kitchen to grab a knife, they will see me and know I see them. We can't hide. The house is too small and they'll see where we go. My heart is racing. My best option is to pretend I don't know for as long as I can, and be ready for whatever comes next. But after a few minutes, I don't hear any more footsteps. I calm down. I might have just imagined it. 20 minutes later I hear my mom's car and see the headlights go across the windows. I run outside, because I'm still a child and I want my mother to know how scared I am. But before I can tell her, she asks me, who left the water on, and I'm terrified again. We had this weird water spigot in the front yard, with a pole that shot up to about waist height and a spigot turned up instead of down. My brother and I would treat it like a drinking fountain or turn it on full blast and play under it like a fountain. When she got home, the water was on full blast, shooting several feet up into the air. Someone had been there that night, on our porch. They saw my brother and I, alone. No car in the drive. They didn't come in, but they wanted us to know they could have. Riveting and terrifying story. Unfortunately, it's hard to explain. I was hiking down a trail with my dog in remote northern Wisconsin, when I just got a weird feeling. At the exact same time, the hackles on my dog went straight up and he began acting really anxious. About the same time, I came into a clearing in the woods and got hit with what I can only describe as a sound wave. It was like someone was blasting a subwoofer right next to me, but there was nothing around. The nearest road was maybe a mile away. Something told me to get the frick out of there, so I quickly turned around and hiked as quickly as possible the rest of the way back. I didn't hear that bass sound after I left the clearing, but I still felt like something was following me. I've heard of that sort of thing happening in, appropriately named, sounds in Alaska and Western Canada. Never in Wisconsin though. Nature is a strange mistress. Semi-rural Australia. I wouldn't say can't explain, but I do get mighty annoyed at the amount of bullet holes I keep finding in shed iron, solar panels, page 2p radio dishes and so on. The holes are often tumbled or keyhole as well, so I don't think it's fuckwits shooting directly, more like shooting at a 45-degree angle from miles away or something. It would ruin my serenity to get beamed by a random bullet. My wife and I were staying at a cabin in a rural town in the mountains. Around 8 PM, an air raid siren, fire maybe, rang out for quite a while. We joked that it might be a zombie apocalypse, and after a while we actually got a little nervous that we didn't know what it was for. So I put on my coat and pots and walked down the road to a small grocery store nearby. Went in, asked if they knew what the siren was for. They said what siren, and when I went back outside the siren was gone. So I put on my coat and pots. Read this and thought, yep, makes sense. Bring some pots with you to bang and clang and keep animals away. I hope you did mean pots. Our two normally placid black Labradors woke me up. My bedroom was on the ground floor, making an awful growly barking sound I've never heard them make with real aggression and fear in it. We lived in the countryside with a huge common and woods out the back of the house. I went into the kitchen and they were glaring at the back door and making a big fuss. This made my hair stand on end and their obvious terror communicated itself to me. I grabbed a torch and steeled myself, thinking maybe it was an intruder, and armed myself with a fire poker and opened the back door. It was pitch dark, and as I opened the door both dogs shied away and ran out to the other room. I poked my head and the torch out the back door, and just for a split second I saw reflective eyes of a really large creature somewhere up the garden, maybe 10 meters away. They blinked as they turned away and they were gone. There is literally nothing in England that can account for this. I slammed the door shut and me and the dogs slept in my bedroom half terrified. The local paper shortly after that featured an article about some unexplained sheep deaths in a farm a mile away from ours. They had been ripped to shreds as if by a large predator. There is a strange phenomena where small populations of big cats seem to be able to survive in Britain for a few generations before dying out. I'm semi-rural. Village with houses and shops, but surrounded by fields. There are loads of Neolithic and Bronze Age monuments, like 1,000 in a 5-mile radius. Anyway, there is this one prehistoric grave which is open, the contents having been moved to the museum. I jumped in one time to get a photo taken and my dog, a placid old black lab, suddenly started barking with full alert mode. Hackles. Danger. Right at me, in the burial kist. Still shudder to remember the moment. Maybe it was a snake. I don't know. Caveman ghost. One Friday this summer, one of my neighbors who has no kids cleaned her storm door. She had no visitors that day. When she woke up the next morning, there were what looked like 10 or 15 children-sized handprints on her storm door. She called the cops just in case there was a missing child or something, and they came out to take a look. Said it could have been raccoons. Probably was. But for a while there I was genuinely freaked out. Summer 2020, I made the mistake of going out onto the porch at around 11 p.m. I was about to take the trash out to the dumpster across my backyard, but I felt something in the yard and froze. A few seconds later I heard footsteps, and something moved around out there. It was not a person. I left the trash on the screened-in porch and locked the door behind me so fast. I don't go outside after dark now if I can help it. We've recently had reports of black bears in the area, so that might have been it, but IDK. I've never seen one here in person. As I was reading, I thought sounds like a bear, then I got to your last sentence. LOL. My workplace and childhood home had bears popping up around the dumpsters and garbage cans, usually between 10 p.m. 11:30 p.m. plus during the wee hours of the morning, 3 a.m. 4:30 a.m. But good call on not going to the dumpster when you heard it. You don't want them associating you with food. I live in a city now, but when I was a kid I lived with my grandma in a very rural area of Florida that was known for being a dumping ground for murder victims. I never actually found a body whilst playing in the woods, but I did find a woman leaning over a creek in a dirty white dress at around 6 p.m. right as the sun was setting. I heard her faint sobbing in the distance and went to investigate. When I climbed over the embankment at the edge of the creek and finally saw her, she almost immediately started screaming at the top of her lungs, just staring into the water. Obviously I wasn't a scaredy cat, I was a brave 12-year-old. So naturally, I instantly crapped my pants and ran away. Still have no idea what that woman was doing, but that area was also known for having M labs hidden in the woods, so that probably explained some of the strange people I met playing in that area. I lived in Japan and went on a trip in the mountains with a friend of mine. On a night ramble with him in an unfamiliar area, we both happened upon a torii that was immediately met with an impassable rock face. This seemed strange to me as torii were symbolically passageways. He and I both instinctively looked up to the sky while standing before the torii, and somewhere that felt close to Earth a great multicolored light appeared hovering above us, letting off light almost like a gas in the full spectrum of colors, before disappearing. He and I both felt something incredibly significant had happened, but had no idea what. Very odd feeling. Somebody a long time ago probably experienced the same thing and built it for the spirits that like to hang out there. My wife, kids, and I live in 30 miles or so outside of town on 100 acres. The house sits 1 stroke to a mile off the main road. My wife wanted the works for security when we got the place, so I did a gate, driveway doorbell past the gate, cameras at the gate and at the house, alarm system, 2 new puppies, you name it. I've always lived way out my whole life, so I'm used to the hog squeals, coyote screams, deer huffing, all that jazz. One night around 2 a.m. I heard a loud shatter and instantly it was covered by the alarm siren for the house. The main keypad is in our bedroom and I look to see the glass break sensor in our son's bedroom has tripped. I thinking the worst, grab a shotgun kept for rattlesnakes and run to his bedroom hollering for my wife to grab our youngest from his crib just in case. I hear my oldest son screaming. I'm shaking so violently I can barely turn the doorknob. My adrenaline fight response has completely taken over. I throw the door open, let out a war cry trying to intimidate a would-be intruder, and my son is clinging to the crib rails and glasses all over the floor. I can just feel the cold winter air snapping through the room. I shut his bedroom door behind me, grab him up, and frantically check the bathroom, his closet, anywhere in the area I thought the intruder would be. I yell for my wife again. Living this far out, we have a system if someone is ever in the house and one of us knows but we don't want to alert the intruder. She gives a response indicating she's alone still and okay. I take my son to my wife and hand her the shotgun, telling her I'll grab the rifle and check around inside and out. I grab a flashlight and my rifle. I scan the entire house. I walk outside and hit the auto lock on the deadbolt. I quickly make my way around to the back side of the house to the busted window. My adrenaline has started coming down and I'm logically telling myself it had to have been a deer, right? Saw his reflection buck the window. Window broke. That's got to be it. I checked high and low all around the house and never found any indication to what it was. I checked the cameras and couldn't find anything around the house at that time either. I couldn't sleep the rest of the night. It took a few weeks for me to let my son sleep in his own bedroom again. I'm positive it was just a deer attacking his reflection, but I've always wondered if someone broke the window and heard the siren and immediately ran. Now, there was a blind spot watching that particular window. I've installed more cameras since the incident and I have one that points down each side of the house just to watch windows and entrances. Motion sensing floodlights on all four corners. And my favorite, one of our pups sleeps right beside his bed every night. Jesus Christ, that must have been terrifying. Waking up to shattering glass sound is pretty much my nightmare. I live in the country, and it is weird how both my dogs will key in on something and run to a place in the yard, focused, driven, hackles up, snarling, and there is absolutely nothing there, nothing, and they aren't looking down or digging, they look up. A few weeks later it happens again, different area of the property, on and on. Been here for years now and even the new dogs do it. Something is here with us. I lived in the country for a few years and for the most part it was amazing. There weren't many times that odd things happened that I couldn't find a rational cause for. But the one time I can recall, it was nighttime. My mom and stepdad were out and my grandma, who lived with us, was sitting in the living room waiting for them to come home. We had the TV off and my brother wasn't home, so it was just us. There had been some fireworks lit off from a farm up the road, so it wasn't really a quiet night. But just after the fireworks died down, I heard something clinking against the gutter drain at the front corner of the house. This was followed by light tapping against the living room's exterior wall. My grandmother was a nervous sort to begin with and she was trying to ignore the sounds, but because there had been some vandalism at another house in the area, I peered out the window into the dark to try to see if there was anything I could make out. Of course it was nothing but blackness. I decided to grab my stepdad's pistol and just make sure everything was kosher. I opened the front door and went out onto the steps so that I had a clear line of sight that way, and then stood there quietly listening for any sounds of movement. I heard nothing out of the ordinary, so I went back inside. I told grandma it must have been an animal and put the gun back. After she went to her room, the tapping started again. I listened a few moments and then grabbed the pistol again, and this time was smart enough to grab a flashlight. As I was making my way to the door, the tapping became thumping and moved up the wall onto the roof. Now I've seen raccoons climb up walls and whatnot. This wasn't that sort of noise. These were heavier and more coordinated. As the thumping moved across the roof to the back side of the house, I decided to relatch the door lock I'd just undone and go down to my room in the basement. I went outside the following morning and didn't really find much. There was some spot near the drain where the dirt was disturbed and a mark on the wall that looked like something had hit it. But I saw nothing that could point to a culprit, man, animal, or other, and it never happened again. I'm rather rural, like an hour from even a supermarket. A few months ago I was in my recliner, trying to sleep. My eyes popped open, only to see a solid black figure standing just off the corner of the chair. It bent over at the waist and turned its neck funny. It was like it was trying to get a good look at me at eye level. I panicked a bit and all I could do was yell, what, and it disappeared. Part of me thought I must have been dreaming, but then I realized that my German Shepherd was hiding underneath the foot of the recliner, something he had never done in his 6 years. He did that for the next few weeks. Unbelievably relatable reaction tbh. I used to own 5 acres of land with a cow field as my only neighbors on all sides. I've always sang these really silly songs to my pups. One is the nursery rhyme Daisy, Daisy. I sing the songs inside my house mostly because my dogs are indoor dogs. Anyway, one crisp fall evening I was inside my house alone with my windows open. I heard a faint, low whistle. It was the Daisy tune, whistled slowly and deliberately. At the end of the verse, the whistling stopped. I was too scared to look outside. I'll never know what caused that noise. I think you accidentally taught a bird a new tune. This isn't scary per se, but I think it's the sort of thing everyone is looking for. So, I live on a patch of forest leading into Maine's Great North Woods. I walk my dog along the same winding trail almost every day. In all my years here, I've never seen another person out on the paths, ever. It's not a tourist spot, a camping spot, or a hunting spot. It's just one anonymous patch. I keep finding stuff, though. A can of Pepsi, unopened, from the 80s. A fold-up tent from Sweden, a backpack with nothing in it. Toy cars, a bottle of wine, pieces of a car transmission, old cash, an unused notebook. I'll find these things on the path I walk, randomly, in places they definitely weren't located the day before. I found that can of Pepsi on a log, the same log I have sat on a million times. There's one way in and one way out of those woods, unless you're climbing down cliffs. And why would you do that just to dump garbage on my land? Lived 30 miles from the main road. Private land all the way to the house. Big panel windows all around the living room that looks over the property. We had no one near us, so privacy was constant. Up late watching monster truck rally with the living room lights on. No lights on outside. Two men come up to the window and slap their hands on the glass and look right at me. I can hear them say to let them in and casually and slowly walk towards the front door connected to the living room. The door and connected frame was large and wide. When they walked behind the frame of the front door where I couldn't see them, I heard nothing. I walked to an angle where I would be able to see them and saw nothing. They weren't there or anywhere. It was like nothing happened, and I started to think that I imagined the whole thing. The slow walk and dead eyes were just so weird. Oof, that gave me the heebie-jeebies. My mom lives in the woods with my young nephew. Totally dark at night. Tiny house. She woke up in the middle of the night to her banging on the house. Eventually she worked up the courage to look out her bedroom window. She saw a buck, banging its head against the siding, just backing up and rearing toward the house over and over. I hear from other redditors it's some sort of brain-eating parasite that makes buck kill themselves. I'm sure someone will provide a link. I was a live-in caretaker for a 94-year-old woman with Alzheimer's for about a year and a half. She had moved into her daughter's home deep in the woods of middle of nowhere, Washington. Marie was prone to say weird things, like that her sister, deceased, mother, deceased, and husband, deceased, were in the house or outside regularly. I had been working with dementia patients for a few years by this point, so it never bothered me. Marie was terrified of the woods. She would tell me about how there's dangerous animals out there and I could get lost easily, so I must always stay inside. She was also worried about her mother and husband having to travel through them. Again, this wasn't worrisome behavior given her health condition. I had been working with her for about 6 or 7 months when I would start waking up to her walking down the halls in the middle of the night. Sundowning is fairly normal for people with Alzheimer's, so again I wasn't troubled by this, but she started going to a specific window and giggling, like she was interacting with someone outside the window. When asked what she was doing, she'd say, "My mother is out there." Kind of weird, but there's a different perception in her world now. One night in dead of winter, her daughter and I are awoken to the blaring of the house's alarm system. The daughter and I checked the doors and windows, none of which seem to be disturbed or unlocked. The only thing missing is Marie. She is nowhere in the house. Panicked, I rush outside to find her while the daughter continues to search the house. No tracks anywhere, no disturbed snow, nothing. After 10-15 minutes of yelling searching the woods, I start making my way back to house where her daughter was already in the process of calling 911. As I approach the house, I see Marie standing outside the window she normally stood at, giggling. There's not a single footstep in the snow around her, nor is she cold to the touch. She's just standing there laughing at nothing. Didn't even know she was outside. Her late night window visits became more frequent after this. but less happy. She'd get combative with the window and scream at whoever she believed to be there, then it just stopped one day. One of the last conversations I had with Marie before she passed, she told me to not let them take me into those woods. I hope they didn't. Marie may have been reacting to her own reflection in that window. My mother had Alzheimer's in her last years and spent a lot of her time talking and laughing with the old woman she saw every day in her mirror. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.